There's a specific kind of quiet that happens after you leave. Not relief. Not the exhale they promised themselves would come once you were finally gone, finally out of their house, finally out of their conversations, finally out of the particular shape their life had taken that required you to be the reason things weren't working. Not that. Something else. Something they didn't plan for and haven't named yet, even now, even after however long it's been. Months, maybe years, maybe so long that the people who are new to the family don't even know you exist, except as a name someone mentions too carefully and then doesn't finish the sentence. That quiet isn't peace. You need to understand that before anything else. The quiet they're living in right now, it's not the quiet of a problem solved. It's the quiet of a house with a load-bearing wall removed. Everything still standing, technically, but nothing quite level anymore, and everyone pretending not to notice the cracks running up toward the ceiling. You were the problem child, right? That was the role. Assigned early. Maybe so early you can't actually remember a time before it, which is worth sitting with for a second, because that means the decision was made about you before you were old enough to have done anything significant enough to deserve it. The label came first. Then your whole life inside that family became evidence gathered in support of a conclusion that was already written. Think about what that actually is. As a mechanism. As a thing one group of people does to another person. They needed somewhere for the tension to live. Every family has tension. The specific kind, the inherited kind, the kind that comes from two people who shouldn't have stayed together staying together, the kind that comes from old wounds nobody processed that got passed down like furniture. That tension needs somewhere to go. It pools. It has to collect somewhere. And the child who is most sensitive, most reactive, most unwilling to pretend, most incapable of performing the family's preferred fiction of itself, that child becomes the container. That was you. Not because you were broken, because you were honest. Your nervous system wouldn't let you go numb the way theirs had. Your mouth kept saying things in rooms where the unspoken agreement was that certain things don't get said. You kept pointing at the elephant, over and over, in ways that were sometimes messy, sometimes explosive, sometimes so clumsy and graceless that it was easy, genuinely conveniently easy to focus on the delivery rather than the content, which is exactly what they did. Here's the thing about being the problem child that nobody talks about. You weren't the problem, you were the symptom. The visible one. The one whose dysfunction was external and loud, while everyone else's dysfunction was internal and quiet, and therefore invisible, and therefore not counted. Your sibling who never caused trouble. Ask them what's happening in their marriage. Or their relationship with their own body, or the dreams they stopped having around age 19 that they still haven't noticed are gone. Your parent, who had everything together, track what they reach for at the end of a hard day. Track how they talk about themselves when they think no one's really listening. Track what they've never once allowed themselves to want. The people who don't cause trouble in a troubled system aren't healthy. They're adapted. And adaptation to something broken doesn't make you whole. It makes you shaped like the broken thing, which is its own damage. Just quieter, just more socially acceptable, just easier to carry without anyone pointing at it. You didn't adapt. That's what they called the problem. And then you left, or they pushed you out. Or some combination of both that neither side would describe the same way. These things rarely have clean narratives. There was probably a final incident, A last conversation that went wrong or went right, depending on which version of the truth you're operating from. A door, literal or otherwise. And you've probably spent a significant amount of time, more than was fair to spend, more than they deserved, going over it, replaying it, finding the moments where you could have been different, less, more careful, more contained. Stop that. Not because you were perfect. You weren't. But because the question of whether you handled the exit gracefully is the wrong question. And it's a question that keeps you in their frame. Their frame is built to make you wrong. You can audit your behavior inside their frame for the rest of your life and still come out guilty because the verdict was written before the trial. That's not a justice system, that's a ritual. Now, what's happening back there? Because I want you to actually understand this. Not so you can feel vindicated, though some of that is unavoidable and honestly not entirely unearned, but because there's something important in here. Something that has to do with what you are and what you were always doing inside that family without knowing it. The first thing that happened when you left, and this is the part they will never in 1,000 years admit to anyone, including themselves, the first thing that happened is that tension went looking for a new container. It didn't dissolve. It doesn't dissolve. It migrated. Someone else is now doing what you used to do. Maybe not explosively, maybe more subtly. But somewhere in that family system, someone is now carrying what you were carrying. And they're less equipped for it than you were, because you were the original. You had years of practice. You had whatever it is in your particular wiring that made you suited to being the mirror, even when being the mirror felt like being shattered. The person carrying it now is struggling in ways that are starting to be visible. And when they look for reasons, because people always look for reasons, it's the one thing humans are relentless about. Your name comes up. Your absence comes up. Things were better when, before the falling out, before everything got complicated. Which is extraordinary when you think about it. You were the problem. You left. And now things aren't better. They're differently bad. And somehow you're still the reason. The ghost of the problem child is more convenient than the possibility that the problem was never a child. There's a specific conversation that happens in families like this one. It happens at kitchen tables. It happens in text threads. It happens in the car after a dinner where someone said something that made the whole table go brittle. The conversation is about you. Nominally. But what it's actually about is the fact that without you, everyone has to look at each other directly. And what they're seeing when they look directly is less comfortable than they expected. The family's identity was organized significantly around the narrative of you. You were the story that explained things. The black sheep story. The difficult one. The one we tried so hard with. That story did a lot of work. It explained the tension. It explained why things weren't quite right. It provided a reason that lived outside any of them. And you took it with you when you went. So now they're sitting with each other and the tension is still there, ungoverned, unexplained, and no one has a container for it and no one is willing to do what would actually need to be done, which is look at it honestly, look at where it came from, look at who taught whom to be the way they are. And so instead they perform a kind of collective low-grade mourning that they've misidentified as missing you. They don't miss you. Some of them don't even know you anymore. You've changed in ways they haven't been present to witness. The person they're mourning is a role, a narrative function. The specific shape your presence made in the room that everything else was arranged around. They miss having something to organize themselves against. This is the part that's hard. Not hard to say. Hard to actually let land. Sazulem, you were paying a tax your whole life that nobody acknowledged was a tax. Your reactivity, your explosiveness, your inability to keep it together in the rooms where keeping it together was the primary social requirement. All of that was the overflow of a container that was too full. And no one filled the container. They just kept being surprised when it overflowed and pointing at the overflow as evidence of your deficiency. Every single person in that family was outputting something. Fear, resentment, unprocessed grief, ambient rage at a life that didn't go the way they needed it to, disappointment, loneliness, the particular despair of people who love each other in ways that hurt. Every person, including the quiet ones, including the competent ones, including the ones who have jobs and functional relationships and who have never in their life been called a problem. All of that was going somewhere. It was going into you. You were processing emotional material that wasn't yours. You had been doing it so long, starting so young, that it didn't feel like a theft. It felt like your personality. Like some native characteristic of who you were, your sensitivity, your volatility, your particular frequency of chaos that everyone was so exhausted by. That wasn't your chaos. Or more precisely, it wasn't only yours. Yours was a fraction of it. The rest was donated. There's a specific kind of growth that happens to the person who leaves a system like this. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in uncomfortable increments, usually while you're doing something mundane. You'll be in the middle of making coffee or sitting in a waiting room, and something will surface, a memory that you've thought about 100 times, but this time it means something different. This time you're seeing it from outside the frame you were given, and the outside view is so disorienting that you genuinely aren't sure if you can trust it. That disorientation is important. Don't rush past it, because what's happening in that moment is your brain revising. It's taking the evidence of your own life and running it through a different interpretive model. One that doesn't require you to be the protagonist of a story called My Own Dysfunction. This process is long and lonely, and occasionally you will wonder if you've just invented a more comfortable story to replace the uncomfortable one you grew up with. Which is a fair thing to wonder, and the fact that you're wondering it is probably evidence that you haven't. The people who have genuinely just replaced one comfortable fiction with another don't tend to interrogate it that hard. What you became after leaving, and I mean the actual you, not the theoretical you, not the best case version of you, but whatever specifically difficult and particular and still in progress person you actually are, that person was not supposed to exist. That sounds dramatic. It isn't, really. Family systems, especially closed ones, especially ones built around a shared story of one member's dysfunction, are not designed to produce people who leave and then become something other than what the story predicted. The story has an ending. The problem child either gets so broken they validate everything, or they come back and resume their role, or they disappear entirely into a life nobody hears about, and the story just ends. There's no chapter in the story where the problem child leaves, gets quiet, does the uncomfortable interior work, survives several things that should have finished them, comes out with a set of capabilities nobody inside the family system has because nobody inside the family system ever had to develop them, and then simply lives without resolution, without returning to prove something, without apology, and without war. That's the version of the story you're living. And it doesn't fit their genre. Some of them have looked you up. You may or may not know this, but statistically, in families like this one, someone has looked. Maybe more than once. Maybe recently. They weren't looking to reconnect. They were looking for evidence. Evidence of the narrative continuing. Of the problem child still being the problem child. Because if you're still a mess, everything makes sense. If you're still struggling, the taxonomy holds. They were right. It was you. The label was accurate, and the distance was necessary, and everything that happened for a reason. But that's not what they found. What they found, or didn't find, which is its own kind of information, was something that didn't confirm the story. And that is a specific kind of unsettling that has no clean resolution for them, because it means either they were wrong or you hid it well, or they don't have the whole picture. None of those options is comfortable. Being wrong means looking at everything. Hiding it well is too sophisticated for the version of you they're working with. Don't have the whole picture means they're outside something now, which is new for them. The family story was always something they were inside of, and you were the object of. So they close the tab. They go back to what they were doing. And somewhere very quietly in a part of themselves they don't usually visit, something sits and doesn't quite settle. Here's the thing about absence that people who study systems understand, and people inside those systems almost never do. The identified problem's departure does not improve the system. It reveals the system. For years, you were the explanatory mechanism. Everything that was off, everything that was difficult, everything that wasn't working, it filtered through the story of you. And that story was functional. Not healthy, but functional. It gave everyone a shared object to organize around, a common language, a reason. Your absence removed the object, but it left the everything that was off completely intact. Now it's just floating, unattributed. And the work of figuring out where it actually comes from, who taught what to whom, whose patterns are whose, what the real original wounds were before they got passed down as personality traits, that's work that requires a tolerance for self-examination that was not developed in that house. The house developed a tolerance for external examination, for looking outward at the problem. And you're gone now. So they look outward, and there's nothing there. And they can't look inward, because they never learned to. And so they just sit in the static, which looks from the outside like people living their lives, which it is. But it also feels from the inside like something that can't quite be named. Some of them know it's you, or know it's your absence, or have half a thought that starts with what if we were wrong and doesn't finish. Some of them don't know anything specific. They just feel it, vaguely, like weather. I want to say something carefully here. This is not about going back. This is not a case being made for reconciliation or return, or the kind of resolution that makes for a satisfying narrative. Sometimes systems are too calcified to change, and the kindest thing, the thing that actually protects what you've built of yourself since leaving, is to stay gone. Boundaries are not doors left ajar. The point of all of this is something else. The point is that you need to actually understand what you were doing inside that family, because until you do, you're going to keep misattributing things about yourself. You're going to keep treating capabilities you developed as coping mechanisms. You're going to keep being faintly embarrassed by the very things that saved you. Your sensitivity is not a defect. They almost beat out of you. It's the whole reason you survived intact, rather than surviving adapted. You felt everything because you wouldn't stop feeling everything. And that is not a weakness with good PR. That is an actual structural strength that got treated as a liability by people who were afraid of their own feeling and needed someone nearby to hold it for them. Your reactivity, the thing that made you the problem, was the honest reporting of conditions that everyone else in the room was in denial about. You were the fire alarm, They tried to disable you rather than address the fire. You should not look back at the fire alarm and think, I really need to work on that. The fire was real. You were right about the fire. There's a version of this story where you carry all of this the wrong way, where the understanding of what happened to you becomes a new kind of weight, a justified bitterness that lives in your chest and informs every relationship afterward, showing them what they did to you, showing yourself what they did to you, on a loop that keeps you frozen in relation to a family you're no longer even physically near. That's not what this is for. The clarity about what happened, the full, honest, unflinching understanding of the mechanics of how you got labeled, and why and what it cost you. That clarity is not meant to make you a museum of your own damage. It's meant to let you put it down. Actually put it down. Not perform putting it down in therapy or in the version of the story you tell people, but genuinely set it somewhere outside your body and walk away from it. You can't set something down until you know what you're holding. That's just physics. Most people who grew up as the problem child are still holding it, still slightly crouched around it, still organized in ways they don't notice around the original verdict about who they are. Still, in some corner of their daily life, gathering evidence against the label or proving the label right, because either way, the label is still the reference point. Putting it down means it stops being the reference point. You stop being the problem child who survived. You stop being the scapegoat who got out. You stop being the proof that you were never the problem. You just become whoever you actually are, which at this point is something fairly remarkable and fairly specific and fairly real. They haven't recovered. That's true, and it will probably stay true for a while. Maybe for a long time, maybe in some members of that family, forever. Because the changes that would need to happen for recovery to occur are not changes anyone in that house is going to make voluntarily, and you cannot make them for anyone, and trying to will just pull you back into the old shape. But they're not recovering is not your problem to solve. Say that again, slowly. They're not recovering is not your problem to solve. You spent years being the container for everything that couldn't find another home in that family. You are not the container anymore. You are not responsible for providing a place for the tension to live. You are not the explanation for why things are the way they are. You are a person. Specifically, particularly, irreducibly. Yourself in a way that took extraordinary circumstances and an equally extraordinary refusal to disappear, to produce. They called you the problem child. They have not recovered from your absence. Those two facts, sitting next to each other, say everything worth saying. The problem was never you. The problem is still there. You're not.